I had a leather-covered pair of glasses that I've worn for over 10 years. Over time, they aged, shrank, came apart, but I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. It took me nearly a month from choosing the leathers, making patterns, skiving, gluing, to carefully wrapping every piece. So after countless failures and experiments, the frame was finally complete. And that's life now in the temples. And honestly, I thought it would be the easiest part, small and looked simple, but it ended up being the part that tested me the most. I failed twice completely, and only on the third try and I finally managed to get it right. That's why I record the full process to share what fundamental skills I experienced. And if you are into leathercraft yourself, I hope what I figured out have saved your time, frustration, avoid mistakes I experienced. When I peeled up the old leather from the temple for the first time, I saw that it was built on the plastic frame. Since they are symmetrical, I use craft tape just to create the side part pattern, while the other side can just be mirrored. To make it accurate, I cut notches along the curves that made the paper more flexible, because what I need is not a flat shape, but wraps around. At this point, I use my fingers press out a rough shape. You can already see the paper wrapping along the side on the temple. This step is just a preparation for what comes next. Then I use the pencil carefully trace along the outline. It's also my base reference. You could say this is a master pattern. Using the pencil line as a guide, the paper was cut as neatly as possible. This version serves as the base template. Since seams allowance will be added later, after cutting it out, the first step was marking the logo position. That's because when gluing the leather later, this will be the initial alignment point. To save your time, I've already made a version with the actual lines added. I just took the master pattern and used a gauge to add consistent margins. You'll probably get it right away, right? At this point, I went with an off-white color cowl head to contrast with the blue leather on the frame. This leather is very stretchy and soft. To avoid cutting errors, the paper pattern had to be fixed onto the leather with double-sided tape. But since the tape was too sticky, I first reduced its thickness by hand and prevented it from leaving marks. Next, I double-checked the direction of the leather stretch. Before the final cut, a rough outline was trimmed to shape. An additional piece was also set aside for skiving tests later. Even at this stage, the paper pattern stays on. The leather was soft and thick. Cutting corners was tricky. So I took it slow, one small section at a time. Along the straightest part, a clean cut could go through in one stroke. But at the joint, the blade had to follow the earlier cuts exactly. It's a small thing, but getting that line right really matters. The thickness here is over 2 millimeters. At that thickness, wrapping the temple isn't possible. Skiving it down absolutely necessary. So here is the skiving machine. For the skiving process, the original old leather will serve as a reference. But it won't be matched exactly. Adjustments will be made based on the hardness and elasticity of the new leather. Here is a whole set of different presser feet available. But for this job, a large presser foot was chosen to do a full skive on the leather. A special type of the tape was attached on the bottom of the presser foot. This helps reduce friction with the leather. Before skiving, I need to install the foot. Adjust the angle, set the height, and check the feed wheel and the blade position. There are a lot of details here, but I won't go into all of them in this video. If you are interested in this finer adjustment, check out my previous skiving videos. They will definitely help. Before working on the real piece, a skiving test is necessary. The machine settings will be fine-tuned based on the test results. This step is essential. After skiving, the thickness checked again. Placing it against the temple helps to visualize the effect. And you can see the ladder is still too thick, so more skiving will be needed. Right now it's at 0.8 mm. I wrap it around the temple. What do you think? Still looks thick, right? Since the temples have some curves and corners, extra careful checks are needed in those spots. If the ladder is too thick, not only it is hard to apply, but it also looks bulky and clumsy. In the end, the final thickness settled around 0.5 mm. That was the sweet spot, thin enough to wrap nicely, but still strong enough to hold up. Once everything was confirmed just right, the next step is applying glue onto the ladder. A thinner had been added to improve flow and help the glue penetrate better. You can see that this ladder really absorbs a lot of glue. So at least 2 coats are needed to ensure a strong bond. After the glue is applied, 2 alignment holes are punched into the ladder, matching the logo placement on the paper pattern. These holes must line up exactly with the ones on the temple. The next step is to attach the logo. After double checking everything, I applied glue on both of the back of the logo and the surface of the ladder. Then it was time to glue the temple itself. Before attaching the ladder, glue was applied to the temple as well. To ensure a strong bond, an additional layer was added to the ladder. Because a thinner was mixed into the glue, the actual adhesive content is lower, so an extra coat is necessary. Then it was attached. Once that step was complete, I moved on to glue the sides and back. So before gluing the sides, pressing the ladder with fingers helps stretch it a bit. This step makes it feel softer and easier to work with later. The hardest part of the side isn't just sticking it on, but make it look thin and smooth. At the joint, it has to look seamless, no overlap. So I started from the hinge area and marked the spots that needed to be skived thinner. At this stage, only hand skiving was possible. The skiving knife has to be very sharp. Instead of a whetstone, polishing paste is used to sharpen it. To keep the blade sharp, I strop it every few strokes. Don't wait until it gets dull. By then, it's already too late. The temple is already glued, so I have almost no space to work. But there's no turning back. I have to continue. Honestly, I set myself up for trouble. Luckily, it's turned out just right. This is a fact that was aimed for. Once confirmed, the rest was glued on. Most of the temple side is pretty easy to glue, but there are 2 tricky spots needed to pay more attention. The first spot is the inward curve. I need to press it first, then make a small relief cut to release tension, so it can stick more tightly. The other tricky spot is the curve at the temple tip. You can see here that the exit ladder bunches up and wrinkles. I need to arrange those in a neat looking, flatten each one onto the temple. Because I didn't leave much extra ladder and the wrinkles are tight, I had to use a tweezer to lift and flatten bit by bit, pressing the ends harder so they don't bounce back. The hardest part here is hiding all the wrinkles behind. No bogging allowed. That's why I kept adjusting and tested over and over. Unfortunately, I couldn't hide them all. Some still showed, so I had to peel it open and inspect it to figure out how to improve it. Finally, I used a pen to mark the wrinkles area. Told myself, just fix this one spot, then move on. The best solution was still to make the ladder thinner, so I picked up my knife again. This time the space was even tighter. The blade couldn't reach. My hands had nowhere to cooperate. Honestly, trying to fix this now only made it harder for myself. I should have done it before gluing. It would have been way easier, but still I had to continue. As you can see, I scraped the leather in small patches, which led to some unevenness that would show through after gluing. I figured since I've already reached a point of no return, I might as well treat this as an experiment. The gluing process was the same as before. Apply glue, let it dry, and then inspect the result. Because last time, the wrinkles peeled up at the end and has nowhere to go. So this time I worked in reverse, hoping the wrinkles would shift toward the flattened area and be easier to hide. Honestly, the hardest part wasn't wrapping the leather itself. It was getting the camera to focus clearly on such a tiny area, so you could actually see what I was doing. That's what made the process really challenging. I had to work on the leather while consistently checking the footage and adjusting the camera angle, just to make sure everything was in focus and clearly visible. By wrapping from the tip outward, the wrinkles were easier to hide. Seems like this thickness worked better. Once I handled the hardest part, I could finally continue with the rest of the gluing. And as you can see, the final result actually looks pretty good. Riding that momentum, I glued the hinge area too. And now I'm ready for starting gluing the backside of the temple. Before that, I covered the front with tape, just to protect it from any stains. And you can see there is a step between where the front leather ends and the uncovered back begins. I trimmed down the folded over part first to keep it smooth. You can probably guess how I did that, by scraping it down little by little with a hand scraping knife. At first, I thought it was easy, just more time consuming. But the more I worked on it, the more it didn't feel right. I couldn't make each cut perfectly and consistent. So even though it was thinner than before, there was still a visible bump. On top of that, it looked like something had chewed the edge, which made me feel pretty bad. That's not the standard I hold for handmade work. And to be honest, the back leather couldn't cover up the scarring from poor scraping. Some of it will still show. Since I couldn't accept that result, I had no choice but to start over based on the lessons I learned. Luckily, I had an extra piece of leather even if it was already glued. I further scaled down the wrapping margin areas to about 0.2 to 0.3 millimeters. It definitely looked better than before, but I wouldn't know for sure, unless I actually tried making it again carefully. By following the same process as before, everything went pretty smoothly. But compared to the last attempt, this one looked slightly off balance. The transition from thick to thin felt a bit harsh, and I had a gut feeling that it might not be very durable, maybe because it was just too thin. So it failed again. So after going through those 2 rounds, I decided to start over again. Before wrapping, I had to remove the old leather first. This was much more difficult than applying it. I thought that because the glue was diluted, it wouldn't be that sticky, but it turned out that bounce was still very strong. Some areas had to be forcefully peeled off, since they are fragile and easy to damage. Extra care was needed around the small logo pieces. Luckily, nothing went wrong there. Next, I need to remove the old glue from the temple. Back then, I didn't know better at the very beginning. Just scrape it off with tools and sandpaper. But later, I found that lamp oil works much better. For this, a whole separate video on glue techniques had been uploaded, how to apply it, how to dilute it, and how to clean it up. Please check it out for the trick later. For the new pieces, knowing that the machine alone wouldn't give me the perfect result, but I could at least use and reduce part of the thickness first. So after that, I didn't move on to gluing right away. Instead, I scraped it by hand. So I checked the sharpness of the knife again, and then tested on some scrap leather. just to get a feel for angle and texture. Even though I experienced to use it, but if not practiced every single day, I always feel a bit unfamiliar at all. Honestly, I took it slow and steady, focusing on each stroke, hoping not to mess up again. It really came down to patience and control. Once one edge was finished, I felt less nervous. Quickly checked the result to see if it was what I wanted. As you can see here, skiving needs to have smooth, natural transition. That's not something you can explain. It's something you just feel. This is why machines cannot always replace handwork. After confirming the transition was smooth enough, I cleaned up the fuzzy edge fibers. You will notice the angles of the knife changes during this step. And one tip here, for skiving, the cutting board should be glass or stone. It needs to be very smooth and hard to get clean results. This edge is done. Doesn't it look way better than before, right? For the curved section, I changed my skiving technique slightly. This angle worked better for me. Of course, that's only because I've gotten more comfortable and confident by this point. So both pieces are done. It's time to gluing and wrapping. After the flat surface was done, you can see the thickness looked much better, especially on the curved part. The wrinkles were neatly pushed to the back. By the top-down view, I can already imagine how the final result will look. The back currently looks like this, and I still need to smooth it out. My method is to trim off the exit leather margin. Only by doing this properly, I do feel satisfied. Next is preparing lining attachment. The pattern should be slightly smaller for better looking. I use the same every congruent leather as same as the frame's lining. Skive it down to 0.4 to 0.5 millimeters. No doubt this leather is super soft and very stretchy, so I need to place a special tape on it. To save your time, I won't go deeper here. The video was uploaded, check it out if you are interested. To avoid the leather shrinkage, I reverse a step. Glue first, cutting second. Once the alignment with edge was confirmed, I glued it on and peeled off the tape. And our temples piece is finally down. That was it. To be honest, this wrapping didn't turn out perfect. There are still steps that might refine in the future, but maybe one day I'll make another version from scratch. But for now, I'm satisfied with what I experienced. If you are working on the similar project, I hope these repeated failures and fixes can help you avoid some of the mistakes I had to go through. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Next, I'll be making a custom leather glasses case for this pair. And I'll be sharing that process with you soon. See you next time.